Well, this is one of the great canards of this argument. If the government, de facto government in Hamas would live peaceably after every Israeli, the entire Gaza Strip is Judenrein. There are no Jews there except when Norman visits. The entire area is completely free of Jews and Israelis. They have the option to live in peace, but they've chosen
But they're living.
what they call resist.
They're under siege.
What this consists
they're
of,
under
let me just give your listeners
They're under siege.
Well, they're under siege because they refuse to live in peace. They're importing weapons from Iran. What life is like in the southern areas of Israel, everyone, every school, every home has to have a safe room that's reinforced, and they have a 15-second warning to get to that room when a siren sounds.
Harry, do you know what's the warning? What warnings do the Palestinians get in Gaza?
There is no warning for Palestinians. In Gaza, there is no warning because the drones fly over at a high altitude, so no one has a chance of escaping from their own imprisoned homeland. There are no bomb shelters in Gaza. No building is safe in Gaza from Israeli force, which has been historically and actually reckless.
Okay.
Take a look.
Well,
take
you
a
were
look
making
at
this argument that the Gaza population are anti-Semitic. The very man that drove me here to this building to conduct this interview just told me in the taxi that he would invite Jewish people to stay in his home if they would stop bombing the Gaza Strip.
Okay, Norman, jump in.
I'm not sure why Dan is complaining about the situation in southern Israel, because for the last 3 years, Israel has been boasting, alongside the Americans, about its magnificent Iron Dome protection for Israel. And this Iron Dome was going to stop all the Hamas rocket attacks. So what actually happened? On the very first day of this current escalation, the very first day, 3 Israelis were killed. And that was 3 Israelis equals the total number of Israeli civilians who were killed during Operation Cast Lead. In Operation Cast Lead, it was 3 civilians and 10 combatants. And so this vaunted Iron Dome, which Israel has been bragging about, it turns out to be a big joke. If you accept the fact that everything Israel says
that Norman is making my case,
then I think you have a good starting point.
Go ahead, Dan.
No, I'm not making your case. The case I'm making
I'm glad that Norman is making my case.
You shouldn't trust a single word
the Iron Dome,
the state of Israel. You shouldn't trust a single word the state of Israel says.
Okay, Dan.
That's a good starting point in politics.
That's what you're on record saying all the time. The truth is that missile defense is something that can mitigate unprovoked aggression by these missiles, but it can't stop the loss of life.
Okay.
And I'm glad Israel has Iron Dome. I'm glad that the United States supports its deployment.
For decades, the Palestinian people have been subject to state terrorism, which they are resisting. So I don't know what unprovoked aggression means.
Right. Well,
and
that's
also, this line of defense is no substitute for living in peace with your neighbors.
All right, Norman, go ahead. Gentlemen, let's listen to Norman. Go ahead.
I totally agree with that. Now, Dan says that you can't deal with the people in Hamas, and that's why there's a siege there. Well, there's also an occupation in the West Bank. Now, certainly Israel can deal with the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. After all, they pay all the bills for the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority's on their payroll. So why haven't they been able to end the occupation of the West Bank? Why do they continue to build settlements in the West Bank?
Well,
why do they reject all the Palestinian peace overtures?
You know, what you call the West Bank.
Why do they reject all the Palestinian efforts in the West Bank?
What you call the West Bank.
With the Palestinian Authority, with their own puppet regime, they can't even reach a peaceful resolution of the conflict and end the occupation.
Okay, Norman, let's let Dan reply. Let Dan reply.
But it's Israel's intention to keep the West Bank.
Dan, go ahead.
If only the West Bank was occupied by a puppet regime. The truth is that what you call the West Bank is what is the land of our fathers. It's the historical homeland of the Jewish people, and it's disputed territory. It's far from belonging to the Palestinian Authority or the Palestinian people.
It is not disputed territory. It is Palestinian territory, and most of the world.
Well, you're mistaken about international law, which is not the first time I've had this argument. But to answer the question, the fact that the Palestinian Authority is not acting in a responsible way is an argument for my side, not for yours. Israel has tried to live in peace with its neighbors. It's bent over backwards to grant political rights to the Palestinians.
Right, Harry,
and they still
do the Palestinians under siege in Gaza feel that Israel is trying to make peace with them?
Israel is trying to kill them. They've described the last few days as a massacre. I will give you a rough, direct quote. Israel is destroying our people and trying to destroy our land. It is our right and our duty as Palestinians to defend ourselves and fight for our rights. That is the message from Gaza.
Norman, what is the end game? What can the Israelis do that they haven't done already?
Ourselves.
No, I'm going to Norman. Norman, what can the Israelis do now that they haven't done before, and where it will succeed from their point of view?
I don't think there may be a ground incursion, but there won't be a ground invasion, because both Turkey and Egypt will be on the phone to Washington. In particular, the Turks will be very angry because they're now doing the U.S.'s dirty work in Syria, and it's going to look as if they care about the Syrian people, but they don't care about the people of Gaza, which is not the message that Prime Minister Erdogan once transmitted. And so he'll be on the phone with Washington, as will the new Egyptian regime, saying they couldn't tolerate a new Operation Cast Lead. And I think that pretty soon there's going to be a renegotiated ceasefire in Gaza. I would want to keep in mind, however, that Israel is achieving some of its goals. So as the head of state of Qatar promised $400 million to Gaza, and things were actually looking economically, things were actually improving in Gaza. And many people on the West Bank were saying, Gaza looks better than our situation. So it was time for Israel to go in and wreak mayhem, wreak havoc, destroy as much as it can, in order once again to reduce Gaza to a desperate state.
Okay, Dan, reply.
Yeah, that's truly absurd. The answer is, it's up to the Hamas decision to continue firing missiles at Israel. They cannot with impunity kill Israeli civilians. They're going to find, regardless of how Harry feels or how Norman feels, that Israel's going to defend itself like every other country in the world will. Turkey would do it this way.
Israel cannot
Egypt would do it this way.
Israel was
the United
put in
States
place
certainly,
with force
and we,
against
the
Palestinian
Jewish people are not
in
going to
Palestinian
stand
land.
by
Israel
and be
cannot
killed
defend itself.
without responding.
The Palestinians are defending
Okay, Harry, let me ask you a question. How well prepared are the Gazans for another conflict? Harry.
People are stockpiling on fuel and food. Police stations, which are targeted by Israel historically, have been largely evacuated. All education centers have been shut down indefinitely. Hospitals already announced a crisis situation within an hour of the operation being launched. The situation is grave. And as I said earlier, the situation is quiet in Gaza in respect of the streets. People are in their homes. The situation is hot in terms of the violence, but it's quiet on the streets. It's quite like a ghost town.
Norman, you mentioned Egypt. I think that plays into this very interestingly. What if they open the border?
Well, that was one of the reasons the Operation Cast Lead of 2008 to 9 was so successful, because Egypt sealed the border and it turned Gaza into a shooting gallery. It turned Gaza into shooting fish in a barrel, which Israel prefers. Israel is the most cowardly army on earth. And so it always targets Gaza because it knows there's no resistance from there. For example, in 2006, when the war in Lebanon erupted, the Israelis were terrified at the prospect of a ground invasion, and they held off on a ground invasion because they knew that the Hezbollah, the party of God, those are serious fighters, and the Israelis would suffer serious casualties. But the most cowardly army on earth won't do it.
Spoken like a truly courageous man, Norman. For you to call the Israeli cowards is really something.
It is true that if Egypt opens the border, there'll be a mass exodus from Gaza of the civilian population, which is exactly what Egypt doesn't want, and which is exactly why Egypt will be on the telephone with Washington saying, no, we cannot tolerate a massive influx from Gaza. You're going to have to tell Israel to cool it. And the United States, I think, will do so.
Dan, what is a good outcome for Israel in this? Because the last time it went through this, it became more and more isolated. Israel is going to become even more isolated now, all of the Arab Spring.
I don't worry too much about Israeli isolation. I worry about them doing the right thing to protect their people. I think the good outcome is that everyone understands that when you kill a Jew, when you kill an Israeli, that there's a price to be paid. And that's exactly what's happening now.
20%
Israel will either have quiet on the border with Gaza,
being a Jew is not the same as being Israeli.
They will be. Well, that's true. I'm not an Israeli. I'm a Jew. I'm just happy that Israel is defending Jewish lives anywhere in the world, and in this case, in southern Israel.
All right, I'm going to give Harry the last word.
A quiet border.
I'm going to give Harry the last word.
Dan,
are the Gazans preparing for the worst? We got 20 seconds.
Gazans are preparing for the worst. When Israel kills and injures and maims innocent Palestinian children, as it has been doing over the last few days, Palestinian resistance groups will retaliate.
All right, gentlemen, we've run out of time. I wish we had so much more. Many thanks to my guests today in Gaza, Washington, and in New York. And thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time, and remember, crosstalk rules.